street accessible, more able for people to navigate, both in multimodal, is, you know, the term of bikes, walkers, cars, where it's a safe place as well. So I'd be curious about the lighting. I don't see any street lights for the number of poles. We got a couple. Okay, good.
The car lights light the streets like
So we've got some time. We've got about 20 more minutes before we're wrapping up. So if we're thinking about all 7 of these photos collectively, what are some of the themes that you're hearing, or what are some of the things that no one's mentioned yet that you're saying, why aren't we talking about this? What are those issues?
We're also particularly interested to hear like your perspectives from your work, what you find might be something in the built environment that's particularly health inhibiting or health promoting.
And if you have any questions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I heard someone mention bicycle racks but not lanes. So like with this street in particular, I notice it's not a complete street because there's no bicycle lanes or turn lanes for cars. So that's something that I'm interested in as far as like planning and making the space safe for all commuters.
Yeah, so I think that speaks to just like making sure that the infrastructure matches what you want at all stages. So being sure that then those bike racks can be used because there's ways for people to use them, not plopping something down and then just like the tick, like, yep, we're done, okay, bike racks.
Right.
And how do people actually use those, yeah.
I was going to comment that in Carrboro, I believe, they took some of the Carrboro aldermen on a bike ride to demonstrate how it's not so awesome to bike in a lot of areas, and I think is a way of getting
That's really interesting.
policymakers engaged in appreciating the limitations, or getting them to walk, or getting them to take the bus, or whatever, to understand the lived experience of folks who rely on alternate transportation.
That's really interesting. Who is they? You said they took them. Do you know who they is?
I remember a conversation about it at Orange County Politics. I might be able to tweet at someone and find out.
Got it. It's Molly Marco, she'll know.
Yes, Molly will know.
Yes.
I believe it was the Carrboro Bike Coalition.
Oh, the Carrboro Bike Coalition, yeah.
Yep.
I look at that picture, what I see is like just a failed original conception of how like space should be built, which is, of course, perfectly ubiquitous and typical for the United States, right? That's just, we just built it all wrong. And so, we built it around the cars. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so, I look at that and you think, take the poles out, right? Vary the utilities, narrow the street, give everybody their front yards back, all that stuff. But it would take a ton of money. It's easy to envision, but does anybody begin to have the resources? Do any municipalities begin to have the resources to try to do that? One last thing, I was just in Sacramento, and my sister lives not on a street like that. It's like an old downtown neighborhood, but they were wide streets. So they don't have the money to narrow them, but they're intervening to slow the traffic down. Because it's you can do that kind of cheaply and quickly with little small medians, and you make the traffic wind, just, those kinds of things. So I've seen that, but
So we work at Active Living by Design with municipalities regularly, and it takes a lot of courage from elected officials, from local councils and commissioners, and having a voice in the community, right? We keep talking about that. The idea of all those resources that it takes and this is not uncommon at any level. It's all an election cycle. And if you're gonna raise taxes to vary utilities or to do these things, there needs to be enough of a groundswell and enough people that are for it, or at least the perception that there's enough people for it, for those things to happen. And you talked about varying utilities. That's a big resource. Let's just back that off a little. In a small community in Mississippi, they basically just made an ordinance that any new construction, commercial construction, residential development, or any renovation of those needs to make sure there's a sidewalk on their spot. And so everybody's, you know, they're at the current stage right now where you're driving through and there's, you know, 30 feet of sidewalk and then nothing, 30 feet of sidewalk and nothing. And it sort of looks silly now. But what that is that's a vision, that's the long-term vision, so that 10 years from now, that's all connected. Or the city then come in and fill in those gaps for a fraction of the cost. So it might, some people are like, why are we doing this ridiculous ordinance and making people do this? When in the long run, it's the long game. You gotta look at the community down the road.
What about folks, I'm interested in hearing from folks that work in the program world or program evaluation world. So we kind of talked about how you approach planning, and having a program background myself, I sort of think about what could you do, as somebody working in a nonprofit or working on a program to, say, promote physical activity, and you've got $10,000 or $20,000, how can we address those things in the built environment that we might not have, or work within the built environment that we might not have the ability to totally reshape? It doesn't have to be limited to this photo.
Well, there is a lot going on in this photo, and $10,000 or $20,000 wouldn't solve all of the problems. So if I were going to work in this community, I would sit, people from the community down and just ask them what are the priorities that you see and what do you want to see change. Because a lot of times when we do work like this, there's a lot of feedback that's, well, property values are going to go up and I'm going to be forced out of my home, so I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point that we always have to, as public health professionals or as policy professionals, we have to work and see where are the community needs, because they may or may not align with what you think is the natural, easy solution. Yeah. Was there another hand for that? No. Okay, go ahead.
Related to that, I think the question that you just asked, just putting that to the community, and convening kind of like a community advisory group, where you're working with youth, it's a youth council that you're working with. Pitting that question to them, and then the answer.
Yeah. I can provide just like an example from my own work, from the farmers market. One of the challenges that we saw was that seniors were having a lot of trouble getting to farmers markets, especially seniors with limited mobility. So one of the things that the farmers market started was doing a CSA that patrons could pay for with their food stamps. And so that CSA was delivered to their door. So that does, in like sort of those like idyllic pie in the sky, everyone just goes to the farmers market and enjoys it, and we just want everybody to go there. That is something that wasn't necessarily like a natural thought that we had, but after talking to people, is about meeting them where they're at, not fitting what we wanted people to do into something that didn't fit. So I think that's, I like encourage folks to think about how there's different ways to, if there's something you can't fix about the built environment, if you can't build a sidewalk, maybe you can see what you can do to bring a service closer to a community, for example.
That's a good, excuse me, that's a good segue into thinking about the built environment, right? We've been talking about structures and functions and designs, but these are ultimately made for people. They're made for the community members, right? So it's great if it looks nice, but if people aren't using it, then what does it matter? So keeping all of that in mind, we would also pose a question to you all, thinking about your communities, what can we do, right? There's limited resources, maybe we're in different administrations and so forth, but thinking feasibly about what we can do. And feel free to yell them out if you'd like, or you can ask us. Yeah.
I'm curious at Counter Tools how successful you are convincing retailers not to put the cigarettes right in front of people, because the cigarettes make money.
Right.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, so I should take a step back, and so we're kind of a consulting organization, and folks are using our tools in the 17 states to try to pass policy. And so there's a lot of business protections, right, as far as where you can tell people to move certain things and so forth. But ultimately, what we're after by showing folks the data, showing them where retailers are, is policy change. So once policy is in place that you can no longer have, and it is policy in place, that you're not supposed to have tobacco be a self-serving item, that I can just reach and get it myself. We still see it, but it's illegal technically. In Philadelphia, they've done that voluntary resolution, but they've also recently passed a retailer density cap. So no, they noticed in their city that in lower income areas, again, you had more tobacco retailers, more than the national average, which is about 1.2. There was about 3.2 per 1,000 persons, versus in higher income areas, it was less than 1 retailer per 1,000 persons. So they've created a policy to where, through attrition, or retailers kind of not having a license anymore because the license is not transferable. Over time, you'll see that those planning districts are more equivalent, that they have about the same number of retailers, so everyone has the same chance of not starting smoking or quitting or what have you. So that's kind of the goals that we go towards with our tools, using the data, using the maps to show those types of things.
So just tying all of this together, what we talked about, what are some ways that, like, we as a general public can take this and mobilize communities and just everyday things that we can do? Is it just even awareness of how the built environment influences our lives, or is there something that we should be doing in terms of trying to make changes where we are?
Yeah, I would start off by saying being aware. Some people aren't aware of how the environment affects health, how the built environment where we work, live, play actually affects health. The other thing, speaking from a planning standpoint, is to be participants in your communities and to try to go to some of those meetings, because there are huge decisions that are made in your community that will affect how things look, where things are built, the design of them and so forth, that happen all the time. So I would encourage folks to make sure that your voice is heard in those public hearings, and that you invite people that maybe don't have a smartphone, who don't have access to the internet, who may not hear about those meetings otherwise with you.
I would echo that. In any community, like Chapel, I'll just use Chapel Hill for example, there's somewhere between 16 and 30 volunteer boards that a local community has. And those aren't like entertaining, but it is a way to be involved in a very meaningful way in the decisions made in the community where you live. And that is one way. You know, all of us should be advocates for the people that aren't in this room, right? And for people that might be working different shifts or might not have access to or the privilege to go to a monthly meeting on design or greenways or development. And you don't need to have the education behind your name to be on a volunteer board that helps influence decisions like that. And I think local councils certainly use those advisory boards as sort of a check-in, because they don't have the time or mental energy to go into the depth. There's volunteer boards in all communities, and they're just begging to have people participate. So whether it's you or whether you know of a passionate community member that speaks out and often, and they're just speaking and not doing much else about it, that's one way. I mean, you know, we could go through the whole list of, and if there's not a current organization that's got the voice around a certain topic, create one. You know, Dr. Fuller talked about that. Like, we got to be doers at some point too.
I think I just add to that, just to bring it back to the example of the bike pathways. I think inviting your local elected official, if that's at a local or alderman level, mayoral level, congressman, those representatives do really make or break a lot of the built environment. So especially state level, so many of these decisions are made at the state level. Your state level representatives are like not as busy as, for example, your senator. And so if you can get them during a recess, invite them to come and experience the because as we discussed today, the built environment is one of those things that you know what's wrong with it when you see it, when you feel it. Some of the things you guys shared was that it's hard to gauge all the things just from seeing the photos. You want to be there and experience it. So until for policymakers, being there and being able to see what the problem is or what the success is can really influence them to make a stand and make a change and come to them with an ask of what you want to do. So that would be one of my suggestions. Also, doing that is free. Inviting them out to tour a playground or whatever those spaces is totally free. So that's an easy advocacy way.
And also on the local level, if 10% of us showed up at the Carborough City Council meeting next, that would raise, people would be like, what are all these people doing here? You know why? Because no one goes to those. I mean, not no one, but there are more engaged communities than others. And if you're in the room, then all of a sudden they're paying attention to you. Yes?
I would say the people who go are generally opponents of any change to the status quo, and they are generally very loud and they talk a lot. And the people who want transit, as someone who's been advocating for light rail in this area and been one of like 3 people against a sea of angry, mostly older generation people who are railing against it, we need, no pun intended, we need people who want public transit and want bike paths to be at these meetings saying this is something that we need to counter those voices.
Right. NIMBYism is what we hear a lot about in planning, not in my backyard.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, also keeping in mind that when you go to these meetings, yes, you have a lot of people who are opposed. So if you would support something, go to the meeting and say why you do support it. Often when we go to a planning meeting or a council advisory committee, you're hearing about, I'm against this, this is why, I don't like it, get it out of here. But being there to support what you actually like and what you appreciate about a community.
How many people have been to a local government meeting of some sort? Would you want to go back on a regular basis? Like, get people involved and like, go with a friend. Make it a little fun outing, make it a date.
Well, we're just in time, so we just want to thank you guys so much for coming and participating. I hope that this was helpful for you. Gave you at least some perspective to take back into your own work and think about how we can think about the built environment differently and really incorporate it into our work. And we'll be hanging around if any of you guys have questions. Thanks again.